wait for people to jump on. All right, participant numbers are rising. We got people coming in for the final session of our 2020 Virtual Members Assembly. I'll give it a few minutes here just to make sure we get everybody on. And for those of you on, if you know somebody who wanted to attend tonight but couldn't do so, the session will be recorded. And we should have it posted to our YouTube within the coming days. So they'll be able to view it there. All right, so we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome everybody to the Fundamentals and Strategy session with coaches Jessica Schultz and Phill Drobnick, both of whom are our national team directors. Jessica Schultz is on the women's and junior programs, and then Phill does mixed doubles and men's. So they're going to take you through some fun sessions here. It's meant to be interactive, so if you want to chime in, all the participation is encouraged. So I guess I'll kick it over to you. Jess, are you starting?
Yeah, I'll kick it off. Thanks, Jenna. All right, hey everybody. Thank you for spending your Sunday evening with Phill and I. We are very excited to be here, and we will do our best to help you prepare for the start of your new week by distracting you with the key elements of our favorite sport. So without further ado, I am going to share my screen here. Let me figure that out and get that up and going. So I will kick it off by briefing over key concepts in the delivery process and discussing strategies on how to improve execution. I'm guessing you are all here because you want to step up your game a little bit, or take something away from what Phill and I have to share. And really, one hint to take forward before we even get started, and that hint is practice. Practice is ultra important with the delivery process and shot making. So here we go. Really just generally getting back to basics, okay? So most of us, if you're like myself and Phill and Jenna, we all started by attending a Learn to Curl. So we went to this Learn to Curl and we learned an introduction onto the delivery. Great, I know how to curl, and I'm jumping into starting leagues and bonspieling. So over time, we develop habits that, if they're not addressed right away, they can lead to us being consistently inconsistent. So our deliveries develop their own characteristics that can lead to our skips kind of scratching their heads and wondering where they need to put the broom down for us. But because we're all here, we're always working to improve and kind of look at what the next step is. And it may or may not just surprise you, but what we really need to do is just take it back to the basics and work on building a strong foundation. So the delivery is honestly kind of like a work of art that is always in process, always being tinkered with, and always trying to improve to make it more consistent and efficient when we're throwing the rock. So by working on building our strong base, that alone will help us be more consistent in our delivery process. It'll make it it'll be much easier to feel when you miss and make a shot and be able to determine the why you made or miss that shot. So, and it also makes it easier to work on minor adjustments as we need to throughout the season. So when we talk about the delivery process, what is yours? Do you have one? And sitting here right now in your living room or office or wherever you're at, can you sit and imagine your delivery process? So right now, just take a moment and kind of just think about what your delivery looks like. And as we work through this, kind of think about areas that you might want to take away and steps in your delivery that you might want to improve upon, or areas that you want to kind of hold on to as we as you move forward and fine tuning what your foundation is. For the purpose of this presentation, we will look at the line of delivery as a completely separate entity from the release. So what I'm referring to in the delivery and the basics that we're going through is just the line of delivery. And it's the basic setup in the hack. So it's what you do when you go to throw your rock, okay? So the skip puts down their broom, what do you do? So I'm just gonna go through what I've seen over time and what my opinion is for setup for the delivery. And as Phill and I was discussing earlier, there's a couple, there's lots of different variations to the delivery, but I think what's important is that you find your key component and you focus so much on that that you become incredibly consistent with that. So the first step, clean your rock. So your skips, figuring out which shot they want to call. The sweepers are talking about weight. Your process, you're cleaning your rock. And then you stand up and step out of the hack, okay? And so once you step out of the hack, that's when you're going to start focusing on your alignment. I think all too many times that we see people where they sit down in the hack, clean their rock, skip puts down their broom, and the person just goes and throws. The unfortunate part about that is that you're automatically going to be challenged with your line of delivery because you didn't take that and separate that process of your delivery out. So clean your rock, stand up, step out of the hack, take a second, and then your next step will be putting your hack foot into the hack. And that alignment is ultra important. And I relate putting the hack foot in the hack and lining it up with the broom to, for those of you that are golfers, the way the club face hits the ball, whether you're going to fade or draw. And it's just this very small movement that if you're off at all, that's going to affect your line of delivery. And so Phill and I were just talking about this. I learned to put the hack foot in. I put my hack foot in the middle of the hack and I line the rock up, I line my foot up with my middle toe with the broom. And Phill does it the same. However, Phill, do you want to share how you put your hack foot in?
Yeah, so for everyone that knows, the hack is rounded, and most typical hacks are rounded. And the reason for the rounded from an old, for those of you who heard about Roger Schmidt, he's been a delivery guru for a number of years. But the purpose of the rounded in the hack is that you utilize that. There's 3 different positions in the hack, and if you're throwing to the right side of the sheet, you use the left side of the hack, and if you're throwing down the center, you use the center of the hack, and if you're throwing to the left side of the sheet, you use the right side of the hack. So that way, in the roundedness, will help you to get your energy and your momentum going towards the broom.
Mm. Yeah, so it's interesting. Just between Phill and I, we have our own a little different, subtle difference in how we line up. But with that being said, practice and being consistent in the way you're throwing is going to help kind of make that make you more consistent and accurate in your throwing ability. So hack foot alignment is ultra important. Also, I see a lot of times people have their toes down on the lower side of the hack, but as you can see in this picture here, Jamie has her midfoot up on the top side of the hack. That is where we would recommend the hack foot being for sure. And it helps generate and feel weight a little bit better with that foot being up a little higher in the hack. So very important element right there. I also tend to see a lot of people shifting their hack foot side to side when they're getting ready to throw. And so one thing that you can work on in practice when you're working on your line of delivery is just focusing on keeping that foot in good alignment and not letting it shift side to side.
Yeah, I think just on that, the key, for what I had mentioned is that no matter what, you want to make sure that your foot is aimed at the broom, and that's the one thing consistent. Your toe is aimed at the broom. That's the one thing consistent. Even though Jess and I set our foot in there differently, they're still always aimed at in the direction of the broom, which is the key component of it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I like to visualize, my teammates from Club Nationals make fun of me because I look at it kind of like a pizza slice. So the broom is the crust side of the pizza, and then it comes down to the point would be where my middle toe is. And so I'm drawing kind of an imaginary pizza slice to the broom, and what can affect that line is if you're off just a hair, that's going to affect the size or how much you're actually off of the broom. So really important that you kind of visualize that straight line from the middle of the broom to the middle of your toe, and then kind of working up from there. So I always do, I'm a belly button checker, so I always check to make sure my belly button is in line, and then my shoulders. So shoulders are square, shoulders, hips, and then lining up with your hack foot, middle toe. So from there, it's tricky because then you got to bend over and you got to get the rock. So really important to really focus on holding that position when you bend over. And especially for those of you that have the forward press and the pullback as part of your release, really emphasizing and working on keeping that stable throughout the delivery process and keeping it online is key. And then getting your foot in right behind the hat, or sorry, when you push forward with the rock, getting your foot right behind the rock. Okay, and so then you have your release and follow through. Like I said, we won't be talking as much about the release today, but just a note on the follow through. We also kind of see people, as soon as they release the rock, you drop your hand down on the ice or you kind of jump up after you're done throwing. But really key to follow through with your delivery, with your release. And the reason is that with that follow through, if you think about a golf swing or a batter in baseball, if they were to stop when they hit the ball, it's not going to be, the ball's not going to go as far or as accurate as if they actually did their follow through. So kind of same thing with the delivery of a curling rock. All right, what everybody likes to hear: practice, practice, practice. If you think about it, league players, you probably don't practice. Maybe you do. Our national team athletes are practicing minimum 5 hours a week, if not more. Pro athletes, they get paid to do it, so they're doing 2-a-days or practicing most of their life. So super important, and especially if you want to improve your game, that's a really important factor for us. So I can't emphasize enough how important it is to practice, especially working on line delivery and trying to get better. So really important though, when you are practicing, try to pick one specific area to focus on each time you go out and practice. I think we get too bogged down in trying to fix 5 or 6 different things at one time, but in reality, we really need to just hone in on one area and really focus and get really good at that specific spot before moving forward on to any other aspects. So with that, so for focusing on practice for the line of delivery, just stopping at each step in your delivery process and doing a mental check to make sure it's online. So if I was to break that down, I would say, you put your hack foot in, stop, you're bend, set up your line of delivery, check all that. Okay, now you're going through. Maybe you do your forward press, you stop there, you pull back, you stop there. And then as you step out of the hack, can you hold your balance and stop in midway through so you're not actually pushing out of the hack? Try doing each step with your eyes closed. Stepping out without pushing and holding your position with the device without a device or rock. So you should, again, this is going back to building that foundation. You should be able to hold your delivery in that lunge position without a device or without a rock. So if you can't do that, now is a really good time to work on that. We have our kitchen floors to practice on, especially those that don't have ice. So it's really good to get into your delivery position and just feel it and feel what muscles are working and holding those. And, going slow through each process and being really methodical with the delivery. As you're comfortable and as you're able to stay online, then you can gradually start pushing out of the hack and eventually adding in the release. Now, if you want to get really fancy, try maybe if someone's around, or if you want to set up something to aim at, do a short broom, try sliding online with your eyes closed. So you'd set up in the hack and then close your eyes, or, you know, if you need to, put a bandana around your eyes and see if you can go through your process with your eyes closed, and one, without falling, and two, see if you are actually online when you do release that rock. So first few times I tried that, it was kind of eye-opening how much my brain, I thought I was on the rock, I was on the broom, and then actually going through the process and releasing and how far off I actually was. So it took some time to finesse and figure that out. But a couple drills here to work on, just a couple ideas, working on drive control. So if you could do this without a rock, and without a broom, or you can do it with whatever you're most comfortable with. I would say if you could try doing it without any device, that would be key, because then you're also working on your balance and stability at the same time. But so working on drive control, you would stop at the back line, back 12 foot button each time you work on that. You kind of, gain expertise in that area. And then for another idea for a drill, you can work online, pick one line and one weight to throw at, and throw it about 8 to 16 times and see if you can feel it, see if you're consistent with it. Work on, if you're not consistent, work on being consistent, and then slowing down the delivery and figuring out why, what part of the process in your line of delivery it may not be, or may be causing you to be inconsistent there. So just learning your delivery, learning yourself, and being able to tell why you made or missed the shot. The last drill is if you're going to bring weight into it. So maybe you want to work on your board weight hits. So you're going to throw board weight, pick a line and throw board weight. So what that means is the rock should go to the boards and sit right on the boards. So throw the rock, hits boards on the other side, and it stays right there. So it doesn't bounce off. And you keep repeating that and repeating that and repeating that until you're consistent and you're confident in that. All right. So I have two key factors that are secret to shot making. But first, I just wanted to share this video that just came out here recently. I think I have a couple minutes to be able to share that. So just to show some cool shots that are being made from some of the top athletes in the world. You check out those old brooms.
The hammers.
The hammers, right? Kilts. That's crazy. Watch one more. All right. So after talking about follow through, not a lot of those guys were following through, but something to work on. So I breezed through the delivery process, and we'll circle back on questions here in a minute. But a couple tips for shot making specifically. I think it's easy for us to get caught up in wanting to make the TV shots and making the big shots, but those are low percentage shots that are not often made. So the key is, oops, stop that. So some areas to focus on and to master, especially in practice, that line of delivery and weight control. So if we focus on those two areas, the rest of the shots will come into practice and come into play, and they'll be a lot more easier if we can throw in our mind, we can throw, okay, I can throw an in-turn hack weight shot. It doesn't matter what other rocks are out in play or what the skip is calling, because I know I can throw an in-turn hack weight shot, no problem. So something to keep in mind in practice. And that kind of brings me to the last point that I have, just kind of a suggestion here. Really working to execute open draws and hit and sticks 100% of the time. I can't emphasize this enough, especially for our juniors up and coming. Like, that's perfect time to be really working on those simple shots. Games are won and lost basically off of those more simple non-TV shots, if you will. And focusing on that execution, winning percentage will increase when we're consistent with those basic shots. So something to keep in mind. Not only will our win percentage improve, but making a higher percentage of those more basic shots, that will help build confidence in those higher pressure situations. So you already know you can make an open draw to the 8 foot. So what does it matter if it's an open draw to the 8 foot and an extra and to go to the Olympics? So that'll just help, because you've already made that shot 100 times before, or thousands of times before. So keep that in mind as you move forward. With that, I am open for questions. If anybody has any, I don't know, Jenna, how that works.
Just a reminder to everyone, you can raise your hands and ask a question that way, or you can type it right into the chat box.
I know I kind of cruised through that pretty quickly. Is there a question? All right, so if there's any questions, I mean, you can definitely feel free to reach out, but I appreciate you guys being here with us tonight. I think it's great to have so many of you guys interested, and we look forward to hopefully seeing you out shortly.
I think there's a couple of questions in the chat box, Jess.
Yeah, I see some questions coming through. So let's see. One question is, do you recommend pushing the rock out at the beginning of the delivery? And Phil, I don't know your opinion on that. It kind of depends on where you're at in the learning process. And long story short, I guess I don't personally, and I don't discourage people from doing it if they are already doing it. So I don't really have a right or wrong. Phil, do you?
Yeah. I mean, I've been playing since I was 6, so a long time, way too long. But so I have a forward press, so my rock does go forward a little bit. The short answer to that is the less the rock moves, the more likely it is to stay online. So that's the easiest theory for someone especially someone who's starting to curl, or someone who's maybe struggling with making a shot. The less the stone is moving prior to getting on the line of delivery, the better it is.
Mm-hmm. And that would be my recommendation as well. So it just leaves less room for error, I think, and ways to get off the broom. Let's see, Lauren's asking, what drills do you recommend for those of us who might not be on the ice this season? That's a great question. Obviously, I don't think a lot of us will be on the ice this season. So one that I do, and I know some of our athletes are doing, is just getting into your delivery and holding that position. and seeing how long you can hold it. And you could do it at various levels too in your delivery, if that makes sense. So if, let's see, I can maybe show it in the living room. It will be really exciting here. Okay, so if you are a low lunger when you're delivering, try getting that position and then kind of work up. Now holding it in a taller lunge position and just going through different positions and holding it for extended periods of time and see how that feels. And that alone will help increase your balance. You can also break down your delivery just in your living room, if you guys don't mind my sweatpants and socks here, but setting up your delivery here and then however you normally do it. So like I said, I'm not really a forward press person, so I would start here and then I basically would just step through each part and feel what that feels like and get those muscles engaged in that spot.
Yeah, any lunges are good. That just like Jess was showing you there are good to strengthen yourself. Strengthening your core and lunges are great for your delivery.
Yeah, and Edie, that would be what I would recommend too for those new curlers, is just getting into those lunge positions and working on building up that technique.
Right. There's ways they can practice their sweeping too, right? I know it's off topic from this specifically, but it's something that they can do if they don't have ice. You can get a piece of plexiglass and sweep on the plexiglass and just work on your sweeping technique. So it's just various things you can do in the off season or during this time where it's challenging for some of us to get ice.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good point, Phil. So you could definitely work on sweeping that way. Planks are always a good thing to work on sweeping. I know people love that upper body work, so working on core strength is important. Let's see, Diane is asking, do you use a stabilizer instead of a broom? Where should stabilizer be lined up? So I think stabilizers are pretty much personal preference at this point. I know some of the higher level players use a stabilizer, and I'm blanking, Carruthers, Reed uses a stabilizer, right, Phil?
Yes.
And then as far as where it's lined up, I think it's key, you want your shoulders square. So
yeah,
I guess that would be the same spot as it would be if you were holding a broom.
Yeah, the key component of that is to make sure that your upper body and everything is squared on the line of delivery. So if that's all squared, then your stabilizer should just follow that path with the rock.
Mm-hmm. All right, we got last one here. When I watch some of the top players on TV, I noticed that they often start with the handle straight and then apply the turn at the release rather than starting with the handle turned. What do you think about that, and why do they do that? So the theory is that you should be able to line up in the hack with your rock regardless of the rotation that you put on. So that's why they're starting with the rock handle straight forward, and then as they slide, they can put the rotation on that way. I don't think there's a preference one way or the other. I think what happens when you start that way, though, it can lead to adding a lot more movement with the rock, which could potentially put you offline more. So my recommendation, what I do personally, is start with my handle started already at that 10 o'clock position or that 1 o'clock position. Phil, do you have a preference or anything to add to that?
Yeah, I start with mine straight as well, and the reason being is that I hold the stone on the right at the end of the handle. So it doesn't take very much to get the rotation on the rock. So and we didn't talk a lot about release and how the variations of it, but the theory is of the center of the rock, and you want to keep your hand behind the center of the rock, because if you want to get all the energy from your slide in through the stone, your rock handle's behind it, and then you're just popping. It's almost like it's very similar to throwing a dart. When you're throwing a dart, you're just going down and through the stone, down and through the center of the stone. So it doesn't take as much when your hand is on the back of the stone to get the rotation on it.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I would agree with Jess that for people who are just starting out or maybe only playing once a week, that's something that takes a ton of practice, and it takes a ton of ice time to be able to do that. it makes it, they don't have to think as much, and it makes it easy for them because they throw hundreds of rocks, hundreds to thousands of rocks in a week or two, where, if you're only playing once a week, it's more challenging to remember to put, if it's coming out straight, to get a full rotation on it. So it's easier to start it at 10 o'clock to get that full rotation on it. So a lot of that comes down to how much they're practicing and what you get used to doing.
Right, absolutely. All right, any other questions before we pass it off to Phill to talk about strategy? All right, well, thank you, everybody. Phill, take it away.
Yeah. Well, now that everybody knows how to make shots, we can talk a little bit about what kind of shots we call. So again, this is meant to be, this portion of the presentation is meant to be interactive. And so just to remind everybody, if you raise your hand, you can ask a question live. Jenna will call on you and allow you to interact throughout this, because we want to be able to talk about questions, or we want to be able to talk about scenarios. What I'm going to do is, here, I'll share my screen. And I suppose I should get this into a slideshow. There we go. You see that okay? All right, so strategy. There's, as we know, and as you guys see when you watch it on TV, you'll hear a lot of the announcers talk about what kind of team each team is playing. And if you look at it, like John Schuster, for example, easiest team to talk about, our Olympic gold medal team. They're one of the best offensive teams in the world, and that's one thing that led them to their success, and allowed them to do what they did at the Olympics is the way that they were able to put offense and the way they were able to put numbers, points on the board. A team like Nicholas Adine is one of the best defensive teams in the world. There isn't a stone that you can put that you likely can hide, because they're able to throw a run back and make a double or make a angle raise and clear the house out. So there's two different styles, just like in any other sport that you're playing. Is there's an offensive teams, and there's defensive teams. The most important thing in strategy is the four real concepts. First, you need to understand yourself. What kind of shots you like to make, what kind of shots you feel most comfortable with, and what kind of shots the ice conditions are best for. The second one is understanding your team. So if you're skipping, what are the easiest shots for your teammates to make? What are the shots that they struggle with? Is there a specific turn that they struggle with? Is there a specific turn that they do well? So understanding your teammates, understanding the ice conditions. If the ice is slow and straight, we tend to go to play defensive strategies. If the ice is very fast and we get a lot of swing to it, it's much easier to play offense, because we're able to hide stones in places that teams can't get them to, because the ice curls so much. And then the fourth real key thing to putting together a good strategy is understanding your competition and who you're playing against. And a lot of times you might not know them, so that's why I say it's the fourth one. But if it's a team that you know, or if you pick up on while you've played the first couple ends, you're able to call a game or have a strategy that you feel that you can take advantage of some of their weaknesses. If they're a team that you can tell early on in a league game that they're not making many hits, well, then you probably want to put your stones in the house above the tee line. So that way, if they're struggling to hit them, even if they come down and throw a draw down to them, they're not going to be shot stones. So when you're thinking about what kind of strategy you're going to call in the game or with a particular shot, those are the four key things that you want to be thinking about. Most importantly, call shots that your team can make. if there's a decision between two shots and you're confident that your team, you yourself or your teammate's going to make the shot, one of the shots, call the shot that you're confident they're going to make. And then lastly, and we'll go through this in this scenario, is be aware of the scoreboard. What's the score? What are the different scenarios that you might be in? If you've got a lead, you can afford to play more defensively. If you're down, you've got to play more offensively. So as we can see in this this slide here, we're going to go through some scenarios. In this specific scenarios, we want to keep in mind that the ice is normal, so the speed is consistent, and we have a good amount of curl. And your opponent, whoever you're playing, is equal ability to you. So whether you're a first-time curler, you're a league curler, or you've curled for a number of years, in these scenarios, you're thinking about the opponent that you're playing is equal to you, and that all games are 8 ends in these situations. Your team is throwing the red stones, and the X indicates the delivered stone, and then the blank spot is where that indicates the original position of the stone, and then the yellow is the opposition of who we're playing against. So first scenario is pretty straightforward. It's the first end of the game, first shot of the game. So how do you want to start the game? And this all goes into you understanding your team. Do you want, in the first end of a game, do you want to play offense? And if you want to play offense, then you're likely going to be putting up either B or C. You're going to be putting up a guard. If you're going to be playing more defensive, you want to start to better understand the ice conditions. It's okay in the first end to just throw it into the house and put it into the top of the forefoot and allow your team to see what the ice conditions are and see what the opponent's going to do to see, are they going to throw a takeout on it, or are they going to play offense, and are they going to try to throw a corner guard? Any questions on that scenario? Pretty straightforward. First shot of the game. Scenario 2, we've got the hammer this time. We're just basically reversing that scenario. So they've thrown the rock on the top of the forefoot. They've made a defensive call. They've just thrown it in the top of the forefoot. What are you going to do? What situation do you want? Do you want to play a corner guard? Do you want to take it out, or do you want to play a freeze? Corner guard would be the offensive play. Takeout would be the defensive play. And the freeze, well, the freeze would be probably the most challenging shot of all of them. And that would probably be the one that I would suggest we remove or wouldn't play that one. And, you either play the corner guard or you play the takeout, because to play a freeze in the first end is something that you typically wouldn't want to play. Any comments or thoughts on that? Jess, can you make sure you watch the question box if we do get any?
We do have one. So how effective do you think corner guards are now with the 5 rock rule?
Yeah, I think they're very effective still, because there's 2 ways that they can be utilized, and it really can come down to what one team is going to do. If they throw a center guard and you throw a corner guard, and it all of a sudden blocks their draw to the forefoot on one of the paths, it can be used as an offensive corner guard and a defensive corner guard, depending on your positioning of the corner guard. But also, we see it's still pretty consistent that teams will throw corner guards, because if you've got that stone out there and then they've got one in the forefoot, and then it all depends on what they're going to do on their next shot. If they try to throw a guard and they don't get a perfect guard, now you've got that corner guard to hit and roll onto. So it's still a very important part of the game. Jess, anything to add on that?
Yes, are corner guards best lined up to the side of the forefoot?
It depends on really what you want to do with your corner guard. I would say in in general, if it's just going to be a straightforward corner guard, you want it lined up over here with the side, with this side here on this portion, half into the 8-foot and a half into the 12-foot. So that way, that's where you want, ultimately, that's where you'd want to have your draw go if you're going under a corner guard. If it's just a general situation where you're throwing a corner guard, the closer it is to the 4-foot, the more likely it is to block your path or your draw path to the side of the 4-foot, which is something you don't want to do, especially once you get later in the end. If you've got the hammer, the last thing you want to do is have 2 corner guards up that really block you from drawing to the 4-foot.
Yeah, good question. Thanks, Phil.
Scenario 3, without the hammer. So we're in the third end, and red's got 2, yellow's got 1. So basically we're up by 1, and it's the lead's second stone. So we don't have hammer. So that's the scenario. It's lead's second stone. I just briefly talked about this. So they throw one in the top of the 4-foot there. We threw it in the top of the 4-foot. Does I keep doing that, James? They threw the corner guard. So this is our played stone. Do we A, throw a guard? Do we B, come around the corner guard? Or do we C, freeze or tap throw it to the top of the rings? So this is a great scenario, especially early in the game when we've got a 1-point lead and we don't have the hammer. There's a variety of answers here. The one rule of thumb I would say that's pretty straightforward is you never want to chase a team around a corner guard. You don't want to be the first one, because if in scenario B, you end up coming a little bit heavy and you come back here, they're going to just use your stone and they're going to tap it back a little bit. And now they're going to have a guard, and then they're going to have your stone to keep it into the rings. So I would say in this scenario, you're looking at the safest call is to throw A and throw a guard, or C, throw another one into just biting the rings or tap it back. This early in the game, I'd say you'd want to err on the side of A. That way because you're only up by 1 and you're still giving yourself an opportunity. Questions on that one? Scenario 4 is without the hammer. So we're third end, we're down 1, leads second stone. So scores 2-1, we don't have the hammer. And we threw a center guard, which would be a standard call if we're down 1. And yellow threw one right into the top of the 4-foot. What do we want to do on our next shot? So they threw it in the top of the 4-foot and a guard. Do we want to A, throw a freeze? Do we want to B, throw a guard? Or do we want to C, throw a hit and roll? The very aggressive offensive play would be to throw another guard, because it's still early in the game and we're only down by 1. Even though we don't have the hammer, we're only, really 1 shot away from flipping the hammer back in our contention. I would say B would be a play if we're down 3 or 4, and we really have to get aggressive. A, the freeze, which is a pretty safe play, which is to come down to their Yellowstone and land it right on top of it. And C would be the more defensive play, would be to play the hit and roll there. And that would be, I would say if we're down 1 and we're throwing a guard, to play the hit and roll in the next shot really wouldn't be consistent with your strategy of throwing the guard. So that's another thing to think about in specific situations. Picking a strategy in the beginning of an end and sticking with it throughout the end. So if your goal is to, in this situation, by throwing this guard in the first stone, your goal is to force 1. So if you're going to force 1, playing a hit and roll isn't really giving an opportunity, makes the force of one more challenging. If you're playing the freeze, it makes the force of one a lot easier. Questions on that? Okay, we're going to get some interaction on the next one here. Scenario is we are in the fifth scenario. We have the hammer. It's the fourth end, one up. So we're in the fourth end, and we're one up with the hammer. This is the lead's second stone. So they've thrown 2 center guards, and we've got 1 rock on the side of the 12-foot. So our options are to A, split the house, B, come around the center guard, or C, play the tick. Anyone out there got any guesses or got any ideas of what they would do? What would the most offensive play be? You can write it in the chat room if you want. What would be the offensive play? What would be the defensive play? Any thoughts, any comments, questions?
Not yet.
Any, Jess? Otherwise, we're throwing you under the bus and you got to.
Yeah. Not on that one specifically, no. Let's see. Someone says defensive would be to tick.
Okay.
Question. Yeah. Good one,
Yeah,
Brian.
offensive obviously would be the come around, right? Like by coming around the 2 center guards that they have, that would be your most offensive play, because now you've got a rock on the side of the 12-foot, and then you're drawing another one around their 2 guards. So that would be your most offensive play. Tick would be a pretty defensive play. The one bonus about the tick is if you play that is you could roll over on a corner guard on it. And then, the split the house, the one thing I don't like about splitting the house in particular is if you want to come up and peel any of these guards later on in the end, and you've got 2 red stones on each side like that, it makes it really challenging to peel. There's not really an easy way to peel a stone out. And that's kind of the rule of thumb. If you've ever got a lead and you're in a situation where you split the rings and they've got a couple of guards, it does sometimes make that tough to do. Okay, situation 6 is with the hammer, 4th end tied, 3rd's first stone. So we've got the hammer, so it's the same type of situation, 4th end, and we're tied. So their stone is the yellow stone up here in front, and we've got one on the side of the 12-foot. So on the 3rd's first stone, do we A, just peel the guard out? Do we B, split the house? It's a little bit later in the end in this situation, so we can split the house. Or C, do we play the come around? So this is where, when I just mentioned, you think back to what was your goal at the end. If your goal at the end was to get to, what's your easiest way to get to? So is your easiest way to get to by coming playing the come around under the center guard, or is it just to split the rings? We're not going to be playing, we're likely not going to be peeling here. The ice curls a lot, so even if they attempt to draw one under, we should be able to throw a hack weight shot and dig it out. So because it's later in the end, we can afford to split the rings for 2. The other thing is if you went into this end thinking I'm good with a blank, well, you can just walk up there and peel the guard. That's not a shot I would typically play. I wouldn't be okay with a blank when I'm in an even end. And I don't know how many of you have heard, but there's the odd and even ends, and I like to have the hammer in the even ends, and I like my opponents to have it in the odd ends. So this is a situation where I'd likely be playing B or C. C is pretty aggressive, and it really is The downfall of C is if you slide it behind the tee line and all of a sudden they can play a freeze on you and force you to 1. If you split the house here, they can, and they choose to hit, you can just exchange hits and get your 2. If they draw around the center guard, you can just throw a hack weight and you still might be able to get a chance to get 3. And if you don't stick around on your takeout, you'd still score 2. Questions on that?
No questions, just agreement. Oh wait, we have one. At which end would you try hard to get even end? To get the even end?
Even ends. I personally believe in even ends more so than probably. I would say most teams think of it in the 6. If you're looking at an 8-end game, most teams think of it in the 6th end. I preferably don't mind having it starting even in the 4th end. I just think it's a controlling factor. But boy, I mean, I would do anything. If you think about it as a 3-end game, if you're tied after 5 ends and you've got the hammer, you've got 2 hammers to their 1. When you look at the 6th end, you've got 6 and 8, and they've only got 7. So really, I would say if you look at it by the book, it'd be really making sure you have the hammer in the 6th end, because that allows you to have 2 hammers to their 1. All right, so next scenario 8 is 5th end, down 1, second stone this time. So we're down 1 with the hammer in the 5th end. So they have a yellow stone that's in the 4-foot. We have one on the side of the 12-foot and biting in the back of the rings. So what do we do with their stone? Do we A, freeze it, which would be right here, A, freeze it? Would we B, just play the hit and stick, just lay 3? Or would we play the come around? This is the 3rd second stone. We have the hammer and we're down 1. So freeze, I always say, is one of the most challenging shots. You know, and if you don't make the freeze right, you leave the other team an opportunity to get 2 in there, to get 2 stones in there to play a little bit of it. Come around would be a very offensive play, coming around the corner guard, but that leaves your stone exposed. 5th end of the game, an opportunity to score 3. You want to make sure you score 2. I really like B, but anyone have any comments or thoughts as to what they like?
We have Edie saying come around the center. Oh wait, maybe that was a different example. Come around the corner, actually. So coming around the corner versus.
Yeah, come around the corner is definitely an offensive play and puts you into a position where you've got 3 rocks in the house to their 1. You know, and if they make a hit, if they play a hit over here, then you know, you're just setting yourself up where you have to make a double to probably try to score 3.
Would you say to not play a freeze overall?
No,
like in general.
I tend to. I'll give you my opinion, and I'll defer to Jess on this too. But I like to play freezes when there's a guard, and I can come around and freeze a rock. If you can see my pointer, and freeze onto something with a guard. Open freezes are very, very challenging, and especially if you're playing on quick ice and swingy ice, to make a freeze on an open stone, like in situation A, it's very challenging.
Yeah, and I would agree with that. I think oftentimes you find you're freezing when you're in a dire need. It's like you're saving grace. You're trying to freeze. So generally, like if there's a guard up front, or maybe a couple other rocks in the back that you have options to freeze down to.
Yeah, exactly. And I think if we look back to one of those scenarios where we talked about, if the team throws up, if you throw up a guard and they draw one under, of course, then a freeze is a good shot. I like a freeze when we're coming around a guard. If they've got one dead buried that you can't dig out, or if they've got a couple of stones in the back of the rings where you can come and freeze to. But an open freeze like there is on scenario A, it's just a very challenging shot, and it makes it really easy for the opposition to get that stone out as well. It's not made perfectly.
Let's see, Phil. We got a few more minutes here, but let's go back to somebody's asking if we could go back to scenario 3.
Yeah.
And explain why option B is considered aggressive. We can review that scenario again.
Also, a reminder too, if anybody wants to raise their hand, we can enable your talking access too. If you want to talk through a scenario live instead of via chat, that's an option as well.
Let me just double check. Hey, Jenny, is this the scenario you were thinking of? Scenario 4, okay.
So scenario 4 is we're only in the third end of the game. We're down 1 without only in the third end. So I would say the more aggressive play on A, B, and C would be B. I'm not saying I wouldn't play B, but the most aggressive play out of A, B, and C would be B, because that really allows the other team to get 2 stones and control the front of the house. C is definitely the most defensive play of these, and A is more of a play that gives you probably an opportunity to control the front of the rings, which is a situation where I like to be in, is when I can control the front of the rings. I think B is a no-brainer, and I'll defer to Jess, because one thing about what you'll find about strategy is that everybody sees it a different way. But I see B as a shot that I would play later in the game if I need to make sure I steal or make sure I force to 1, and I really have to take a chance, because the reality is if they make another good draw on B, we have 2 center guards, and they could have 2 rocks dead buried under those 2 center guards. Jess?
Yeah, and I agree with that. Just because it's early on in the game, I tried not to get too aggressive with a lot of guards up front. I would say if it was myself calling the game, I would call the scenario A with the pro side being the scenario B. So if I had to give I guess that might be tough too, actually, now that I think about it. I might be changing my mind, because it might be okay to tap that yellow one back. So it might be better to be heavy. So clear as mud, I guess, there. But option A is probably what I would call. And then looking at that it's early on in the game, I'd probably call pro side to be a little heavier, actually.
The one thing I will emphasize on this is why I say early on, some teams think once I get down, I have to steal. And that's not the case, because if you play out a scoreboard and if you take care of business, so the reality is taking care of business is what we would consider scoring 2 or more when you have the hammer and forcing a team to 1 when they have the hammer. So you're down 2-1, you get your force here, so they're up 3-1, so you're down 2, you get your 2 in the 4th end, and you're in a tie game. So then you force and you get your 2, and you force and you're tied up coming home with the hammer. So there's one thing I would just urge people is not to get nervous, or not to really push too much aggressiveness early if you don't need to.
Mm-hmm. And we did have one question I wanted to circle back to here, Phil, and perhaps both of us can help answer it. But just basic general strategy, what would you say is, if you had to put the top 5 thought process, or what's going through your mind when you're deciding a call, what to call?
Yeah, so I'll give you mine, and then I know Jess has done her share of skipping as well. So when I really go back to those 4 principles of what I'm calling. I think about, so you'll see our top teams, or the top teams around the world, after every end, they get into a little huddle and they talk about what their next game, what their end plan is going to be for the next end. So, even in a league game, I think it's really important that you go into each end with a goal or a plan as to what you want to do that end. And so, one, that's in my mind, is what's my end goal. 2, what's the easiest shot for the player that's shooting to make? What's the easiest shot for them to make? So that comes into play. And the third one is obviously, in this scenario, is the ice conditions. And the fourth one is, if I'm skipping, I'm thinking about what shot do I want to have to lead myself. So if I'm more comfortable throwing draws, I want to make sure that I have a path to make a draw on my last shot. So I might change my shot, the way I call a shot, based on that, because I just need to make sure that I have a path to the forefoot. If I've got a path to the forefoot, I feel pretty confident that I can make a freeze and kill a team's end. That is what I'm hearing you ask, Jess.
Yeah, I think that's what we're looking for. And I'm along those same lines, right? So we decide what our goal is in the team huddle, and then I try to call the strategy based on that. Ice conditions, players, what the other team's strengths are, that's all a factor. I guess I also kind of evaluate what the other options are for the shot. So if the person throwing comes up heavy or light, what are my alternatives? And also looking at the risk versus the reward of the shot, which kind of comes down to what the end goal is for that end. Is if I have the hammer, I'm okay with getting 2. If I'm stealing, am I okay giving them 1 if I have to, or obviously or trying to steal? So kind of looking at what the end goal is as well. Let me just, Julie, does that help with your question, Julie? Yes, okay, that was good. Anybody else have any questions?
I've got time for, I guess we're at 8 o'clock, but I'm going to do just one more scenario. I bumped ahead to the 6th then, just because we were talking about even and odds. And sorry, there we go. And we were talking about even and odds, and this scenario kind of leads into that. Is, so we're in the 6th then in this one, and it's tied. And this is the skip's second stone. So this is a situation where the yellow team has got the hammer. They're going to have 2 hammers to R1, likely. And we're tie game. And they've got 2 rocks in here in pretty good positions. You can easiest see them on scenario C. And so if you're a defensive player and you're really good at making hits, you're going to play probably the double, right? You're going to play the double. If they get the blank, it's okay. If you're someone that's really good at draws, I wouldn't be opposed in that situation to throw the freeze. If you feel like you've got draw weight and you're confident in making draws, I like option C only because you can put a rock in a position and you can flip the hammer. So it gives you an opportunity to get the steal. And if you're confident in that shot and you feel like you can make it, it can put it, again, that's a freeze, but it's a freeze where there's guards up there and you're freezing onto one of their stones. So that's a situation where I would play a freeze. So I don't know if anyone has any questions on that. There are some people that like to play hits. I'd be okay with playing the hit and roll. Hit and rolls are very challenging shots, and to roll to the right spot in that position would be hard. I'd rather play the double, but this is an easy example of play to your ability, whatever shot you feel more comfortable with, and thinking about the scoreboard. Any comments on that one, Jess, or anyone have any questions on that one?
Yeah, I think Ryan agreed. B seems like it would be easy to miss and give up at least 2 in that situation.
Yep.
And that's the risk of playing the hit and roll.
Yeah.
We got.
Go ahead.
Edie says to freeze all day. I would agree with that, I think. Depending, yeah.
Yeah, and I think that I would play option A if I'm not feeling my draw weight, if I've missed a couple draws in the game, and or if I'm vicing and my skip has missed a couple draws in the game, but they've made a lot of doubles or they've made a lot of hits. You know, I would try to instill that confidence in my skip and say, hey, you got this double all day long. You've been making them the whole game. You know, we know where to put the broom and just make this double. So again, playing to someone's skill set.
Absolutely.
And we can just bounce forward to a eighth end scenario and finish up with that. So this is eighth end tied right here. Tied skips first stones with the hammer. So this really gets you thinking about what shot do you want to make for the win. So if this is the scenario, the rock with the X is what do we play? Draw. Option A is you practice your draw because you're going to throw a draw for the win on the last shot. So you draw to the side of the wing here. Option B would be you could freeze down here, but again, you're throwing a rock down behind the tee line. And option C would be just walk up there, peel the one guard that's closest to the center, leave everything open, and make them make a play. So again, this is going to be a scenario where it really comes down to what, as a skip, you feel like you should play. And this is actually a very common situation where we see a lot on tour. And it's amazing to see the different plays that each skips will play in these scenarios. I've seen a number of times skips play this option B and they play that freeze down there. And then the other team comes and they make the freeze under there. And now all of a sudden, when they have to make their last shot, they've got to touch the button or draw the entire 4-foot instead of just having to make a wide open draw like they could have to make on option C if you just peel that guard out. Or where if they play the draw to the open side and they come up light, maybe they block their path to the 4-foot. So any questions on that scenario, or even I toss it over to you, Jess, to as the things that you're thinking about as a skip when that scenario would arise.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting scenario for sure, right? We have Ryan in the chat box is saying B is probably best, neutralize the yellow stone. It's similar to the draw that the skip would need to make for the win, which I see that point. Open draw side makes sense too. For myself, I'd probably just be trying to keep it open. So I myself would probably play the peel on that in this situation.
Yeah, and I agree. For me, I would probably do the same thing, Jess. If again, this would go back to if I have been struggling with draw weight, I might just play that freeze, the tap freeze, because I know I can afford to be a little bit heavy there. I can come down and tap and roll off of it even. So if it's a situation where I want to try to find draw weight, I would probably throw that. I don't. The one downside, as I mentioned, is drawing the open side. I hate to leave it short and leave a guard up there and really block my path for the win.
Right, I agree with that. And like my situation too, like depending on the draws that led up to this end, like you can always use that yellow one as backing for your draw shot too. Jonathan's asking, at what point does it become too late to peel the guards?
If it's a last end scenario, and if we're talking about a last end scenario, it's never too late. You can continue to peel to make sure you have a path. There can be a whole lot of mess, but if you can draw the side of the button, it's never too late to peel to make sure you have an opportunity to draw the side of the button or have a path to score. But later in the game, I mean, at a different point in the game, there does come a situation where, at some point you have to get a rock in play if you've got the hammer. And if you continue to peel and they've got 2 stones in there, at some point you have to try to make a play on them, whether it's a freeze tap or a hack weight shot. Does that answer that?
Yeah, and then we have another situation. So say you call the freeze, right? The tap freeze. And what if you end up heavy? What happens then? What do you think the other player will, or the other team will play?
So if you end up heavy, like on situation B, I'm assuming they're talking about, and it goes right through the rings.
Yeah, I would say that.
Yeah, so my play would likely be to try to get one just biting the top of the forefoot, blocking their draw just over the side, get it into the forefoot as much as I could to get it closer, to really just make the person throwing the last shot the most challenging. And then if they make it perfect, where it's half in the forefoot, and that person has to make a decision. The skip needs to make a decision. A, do they play the double, or B, do they just have to draw to the side of the forefoot? You're still going to have two shots in that situation, and there's not a right or wrong answer. Whatever shot you feel like you can make. Yeah. The one thing I would just remind everybody is make the shot that you feel like you can make, even if it's maybe not the right shot. It's the right shot is the one that you make. I know there's a lot of skips out there in the men's field that would play the double all day and be confident in it, just walk up there and make the double.
You're talking about the double peel, right?
Double on the last shot.
Right. Got it. Yep. Sorry. Yeah.
Any other questions? If not, I just remind everybody that strategy is always something that's ever changing, and it's one of the most intriguing parts of the game. As a lot of you have heard curling called chess on ice. I don't think it's a great analogy, but the strategical part about it really is chess on ice. I encourage you, whether you're playing front end or whether you're skipping the game, to really pay attention to what rocks are doing and pay attention to the ice, and always continue to try to be learning. Something that you can be doing right now if you can't really get on the ice and play is to watch game videos. I think there's old national games that you can find on our website, or YouTube's got a ton of games that you can find out there, from old Curling Night in America games to past Olympic games. I think during the first part of quarantine back in March and April, I went back and watched some of the 2010 Olympic games. So there's a lot that you can find out there to watch. But watch curling just to see the various things. Even if they're old games, the same things do come into place, and same situations do arise. And just always be thinking about those four components: understanding yourself, understanding your teammates, the ice conditions, and the competition that you're playing.
Absolutely.
Any other questions out there that we have? Otherwise,
we do. Let's see. We have one. Do you find it more advantageous as a drawing team or as a hitting team? So that's an interesting question.
I would say offense wins championships in curling. A lot of times they say in football defense wins championships, and I would say in curling offense wins championships. So you have to be able to put points on the board. You have to be able to make draws, and you have to be able to make the most important shot. If you're going to learn one shot in curling, is a hack weight shot, because if you can make a hack weight shot, you can do anything out on the ice. They can bury rocks around guards, and you can throw that perfect hack weight shot and pick rocks out from perfect draws. It really gets frustrating when you're playing against someone that makes a lot of great hack weight shots. So I would say offense. I don't know about you, Jess. But.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree. Offensive all the time. And then the last question, they're asking you, Phill, specifically, what's up with the Jets shirt that you're wearing?
Yeah, well, so I was in a pretty good mood tonight, and that was because we had a bye. So that means we didn't lose tonight. So this was the best week we've had of the season. So it's pretty exciting. I could actually wear the Jets clothing and not be frustrated or be upset about a loss. Although we just lost on Monday, as you guys saw, and gave the game away to the Patriots at the end there. But anyways, yes, I am a Jets fan, and I am and I am from Minnesota. So
Yeah. Well, we do have another question. I think it's a good one. So favorite games to watch, online game platforms, boards that you recommend to players for practicing and learning strategy off the ice. I know Fly or Die is an online platform that a lot of curlers have been turning to this season for strategy and for practice and to stay connected with curling. Have you watched any favorite games lately, Phil?
No, I mean, I think that, I mean, obviously, I love watching the final game of the 2018 Olympics. That one's a good one that I can watch over and over. But I think that if you really want to see some great games, you can go into there's an option to go into the Slam. You can get a pass, I think, and go into the Grand Slam of curling. They've got some great battles that they've had in the past. I think, and I would defer to Jenna. I don't know if it's available on our website, but the men's final from last year between Schuster and Ruonin, those are two teams, are two of the top offensive teams in the world right now. They are both very, very aggressive teams, and the back and forth of that game, I think, makes a really exciting watch. So that was just a great game. Is that on our site, Jenna?
Yep, it is. And I can share the link with everybody once I get this archive video up as well.
Yeah, it was a great game. And you can really see watching Richie Ruonin and John Schuster skip games is from the offensive side is really, you can learn a lot, because both of them are both very offensive minded. They're really thinking 4 or 5 shots ahead, and they're both at the top of their game right now for skipping, and I think it's something that you can learn a lot from.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Well, thank you. And Ryan Olson also put some links in the chat box if you guys are interested. It looks like there's some games from Sochi and Pyeongchang, so from the World Curling website. So if you guys want to check that out, feel free. But other than that, we are so excited. Thank you guys all for coming tonight. We've had a great time working with you. And Phil, do you have anything you want to add?
No, I think Jess had her email in her thing, but you can find our contacts on the websites. Feel free to reach out to us anytime. If you guys are interested in what's going on with USA Curling, Jess and I are doing town hall meetings once a month. So you can tune into those. Just follow social media pages that Jenna does updating, and we got our monthly updates. I know it's a challenging time right now in our country and across the world for curling, and with COVID and everything that's going on. So everybody, I hope that you're masking up when you're playing, and that you stay safe and patience, and we'll get through this, and we'll hopefully be able to get on the ice and do some broom stacking when it's safe to do so. And I hope everybody has a good Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
Thanks, everyone.
All right, thanks, everybody.